Today, anti-Semitism extends across dozens of countries on different continents and takes many different forms. We find anti-Semitism on the far left, the far right, and even in countries where there are no Jews. The United States is not immune to anti-Semitism. In fact, most religiously motivated hate crimes take place against Jews in the US. Last November, the FBI released its hate crime statistics report for 2015. 53.3% of religiously motivated hate crimes, so over 660 incidences, were directed at Jews who make up less than 2% of the American population. Since 2014, the report noted that crimes against Jews have increased by 9%. And if you've been following the news, we've had multiple bomb threats to Jewish community centers and synagogues in the past 2 weeks that have spanned 15 US states. The increase in anti-Semitic attacks we have witnessed over the last few months is of serious concern. Now, the State Department's mandate is to monitor and combat anti-Semitism abroad. But we are aware that most anti-Semitic attacks in the US, as in Europe, reportedly still come from far-right, white nationalist, and neo-Nazi groups. There is a very real concern today of the current rise in far-right, historically anti-Semitic parties in Europe. These parties campaign on ethno-nationalist, anti-migrant, and anti-Muslim platforms. They now proclaim that they are pro-Israel, and therefore they are no longer anti-Semitic, or they can't be anti-Semitic. Recently, we have witnessed party leaders reaching out to Jewish communities for what appears to be political gains. Just last month, some of you probably heard about Hungarian Rabbi Kovez receiving a Hanukkah card from the far-right, openly racist Jobbik party. And I want to quote Rabbi Kovez because I think his response is good. He said, "It's a nice idea, but to show a genuine gesture toward Jews, Jobbik needs to first take some actions to distance itself from the wealth of evidence proving it is an anti-Semitic movement." We fear that these extreme right-wing parties are actually using their anti-Muslim platforms to gain Jewish support. So how will Jewish communities respond when these extreme right-wing parties reach out, extend friendship, and make political promises to them? For a number of Jewish communities in Europe, this is a pressing question. The temptation, whether out of fear or frustration with current government responses, could be to rationalize or even normalize the far right. We have to remember that all forms of ethnic and religious prejudices are direct threats to European values of tolerance and respect, and also to the very foundation of liberal democracies. So lastly, how do we plan to move forward to more effectively monitor and combat anti-Semitism? It is important that policymakers resist this one-size-fits-all approach. And anti-Semitism manifests itself in different ways in different regions, and it's crucial that we have an understanding of how anti-Semitism is, how it differs over time and from region to region, what factors fuel it, so that we're able to better counter and fight the problem. One of the most effective tools at the State Department that we have is our embassies and consulates overseas. They help us, and we're in daily communication with them, understand what's happening on the ground. They inform us about the social and political dynamics of that region in question, the information sources, which are considered credible, and specific drivers of anti-Semitism, some which are related to the Israel-Palestinian conflict, but many which are not. So our number one priority has been to protect Jewish communities and Jewish lives, and on numerous occasions over the past several years, behind-the-scenes efforts by our embassies have helped enhance security for Jewish communities in very concrete ways. We have worked to help create avenues of emigration for Jews to the United States, but to other countries as well, whose lives are in danger, especially in the Middle East, and to ensure the adequate security at Jewish institutions during anti-Israel protests. We will continue to engage in bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, encouraging governments to appoint a special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, to encourage the adoption of this working definition of anti-Semitism, and to address and condemn anti-Semitic speech whenever we hear it. As a government, we will continue to fight against anti-Semitic propaganda, promote interfaith efforts, and fund grassroots programs. However, governments, and ours included, should also be mindful of our visibility and, more importantly, our credibility when we undertake these efforts. Governments ought to strengthen and empower civil society to speak out against anti-Semitism. We find that civil society can build bridges and foster inclusivity in a manner that governments cannot. Increased success in monitoring and combating anti-Semitism is to a large degree based on building a robust multi-stakeholder coalition with civil society. I want to end with a story, a best practice, if you will, on the importance of working across governments and religions. Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism, Ira Foreman, and former Special Representative to Muslim Communities, which is another position in our office, Sharik Zafar, they were on a joint trip together to the Middle East, and during one visit to one of the governments, they had the opportunity to meet with the Minister of Education. Special Envoy Foreman asked the minister about anti-Semitic stereotypes that were found on a school's website. The education minister defended the school and attempted to justify the website's content. Our special representative to Muslim communities jumped in and stopped him and said, and I quote, "Anti-Semitism is never to be excused under any circumstances." And when the special representative to Muslim communities said that, the tone of the conversation changed. Instead of being on the defensive, the education minister was more willing to collaborate and noted his willingness to work with our office on this particular issue. So we have found that when government, civil society, and religious leaders from different backgrounds and across faiths can build off each other, echoing messages of tolerance, they are both more effective in their messaging and by their example. When Muslim leaders speak out against anti-Semitism and Jewish leaders against anti-Muslim sentiment, for instance, we can work to educate younger generations on the importance of tolerance, inclusion, and social cohesion. Returning to the question with which we began, is anti-Israel the new anti-Semitism? Well, our answer is it depends. We shared how the Special Envoy's position was congressionally mandated, in part because of this issue. We discussed how we grapple with this question at the State Department, how we use a contextual approach. We look at how anti-Israel rhetoric can morph into anti-Semitism when it questions Israel's right to exist and targets Jewish communities outside of Israel. Yet we are clear that criticism of Israel is not inherently anti-Semitic. Israel is a modern democratic nation state, and its policies can be criticized like other states. And while understanding that sometimes criticism of Israel can indeed be anti-Semitism, we cannot lose focus on the other forms and sources of anti-Semitism today. To more effectively combat anti-Semitism going forward in Europe, the Middle East, and in the Americas, we need to continue to share information and best practices, empower and build coalitions with civil society and other governments and institutions, and strive to ensure that accusations of anti-Semitism are made judiciously with maximum effect of protecting Jewish communities and promoting tolerance and mutual respect for diversity.